Today I'm going to be reviewing for you Perfume, the Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind, I think that's how you pronounce it. This was published in 1985, originally in German, but I first heard about the story, I think about 5 or 6 years ago when the film version of this came out. Even though I still have only seen bits and pieces of it, once you find out what the story is about, it's definitely the type that's gonna stick in your head and you're not gonna forget about it. And I'm gonna put this down so my eyes aren't level with the nipple throughout this whole video. Now, I think anybody who has heard of this story knows the basic plot line, but when you actually read the book and you don't actually find it is what he is doing and why this is centered around Perfume and how he is a murderer until very late on in the book. So just in case you haven't heard of the story, I'm going to put a little spoiler symbol up here and then you can just fast forward, and once you get past that, you'll be good to go. The story takes place in 18th century France when a little boy named Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. You guys know I know Spanish, not French. Definitely born into quite dire circumstances. Right away, this isn't spoilers, this is in the first few pages of the book. His mother has him in this dirty, disgusting area. She means to just leave him there to die. People find out, so the mother is executed and the little boy is trafficked around and given to different people, but nobody wants to keep him because there's something very strange about him. Although it turns out the baby has probably the most strong sense of smell in the entire world, the baby itself has no smell. And the story follows Jean-Baptiste as he grows older and becomes more and more obsessed with creating the most complex, beautiful scents in the world. Normally when I'm done reading a book, I have a really clear picture of how many stars I want to give it and how I feel about it, but if you read this book, maybe you'll understand how I feel, but sometimes when I was reading it, I wanted to give it 2 stars, and other times I wanted to give it 5. So when I review this book, I'm not going to do the normal format where I talk about characters and plot and writing. I'm just going to go stream of consciousness and just say random thoughts about the book. Before I get into the rest of it, I will say that little spoiler part, which if you've even seen the trailer of the movie, you know what it is that he's doing, but just in case you want to read the book and not know anything, just fast forward right now. To Jean-Baptiste, regular perfumes that we would probably find to be the most beautiful in the world, he finds to be quite basic and not very interesting. One day he smells the most beautiful scent he has ever smelled in his entire life, and he follows the trail sort of like a dog. His sense of smell is more powerful than even his sense of sight. He comes upon a young girl, and so Perfume, the Story of a Murderer, is Jean-Baptiste murdering girls just kind of once they're into puberty, around 15 years old, and he kills them. It has this really interesting, creepy way of keeping their scent forever. Although this is called Perfume, the Story of a Murderer, and the reason I came to find the book again was because it was listed as one of the greatest horror novels on Goodreads, but as you read it, this book is much more of a character study than it is a horror novel. Although one murder takes place, I would say maybe a third or halfway into the book, all of the other murders do not take place until I think there's 70 pages or less in the whole book. So keeping that in mind, there is a lot about Jean-Baptiste and his sense of smell, and there is a lot of talking about making perfumes. I have to admit, this parts talking about perfume started off very interesting, but when you talk about jasmine and go on and on about the formula and the different ways to combine the perfumes and all the different ingredients, it does start to get a little dull, and my eyes did start to glaze over those passages. And when I say sometimes I wanted to give the book 2 stars, I'm not even more so talking about those areas, but particularly at the beginning of the book, the writing just felt very, very convoluted. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying when you can tell this person is a great writer, but it just feels convoluted. For instance, there's one paragraph early on in the book where every single sentence starts with the book since. But I did become more fond of the writing and come to like it as I went on in the story. One of my favorite parts of the book, and actually the creepiest part to me, was when Jean-Baptiste is little and they're describing his sense of smell and how it's almost as if when the man is holding him, baby's nose sort of flares open and in his eyes when he opens them are this kind of grayish dead color, and it feels as if the baby is sort of seeing him and trying to absorb him even with his nose. Obviously when I describe it, it sounds stupid, but in the book it is quite creepy. It's so animalistic, and the way they describe it is kind of so passive, it just makes it even creepier. And going off of how I was saying they describe that part of the book, the weird thing about the writing was that although there are such horrific things and it's such a strange, almost sort of fairy tale-like story, the writing does sort of feel very passive in the sense that you never get to know really any of the characters very well except for Jean-Baptiste. There is this one girl that he sort of becomes obsessed with and starts tracking, and you learn about her father and how he's obsessed with saving his daughter from Jean-Baptiste. I felt a little bit for the father, and of course I was rooting for him, but even when girls would start to die, I didn't care very much because the author, you could tell, didn't exactly try to make you care about them, because the point of the book was not to say, look how horrible Jean-Baptiste is, it's just to present this character and present the story. Which normally I wouldn't like, but it adds a really interesting quality to the book, because even though it's published in 1985, it feels as if you opened a really terrifying Grimm's fairy tale. Dear God, the ending of this book, if you've seen the movie or read this book, you know what 2 scenes I'm talking about. I didn't see the ending of the movie, so I don't know if they do what happens in the book, but it is insane, and I think especially because, as I was saying, the last 70 pages are when everything sort of culminates and happens, and it's not about Jean-Baptiste growing up, and it's not about him making perfume. Well, it is, but it's about him making perfume with, obviously, what I was saying in the spoiler part. It is just insane and ridiculous, and like I was saying, the writing is sort of very nonchalant, but also very visceral, so which I think makes it even more just shocking to read, especially considering there's such a big contrast between these last 70 pages and the first part of the book. I know some people are going to hate the ending. First, what happens when he's in front of the crowd, and the next when he walks into the building and waves the scent around, and that happens. But the point of the book is not to be realistic in any way, shape, or form. It really does feel like this modern, gothic, terrifying, weird urban legend fairy tale. So with that being said, I'm still having a hard time rating this, but I'm going to give Perfume, the Story of a Murderer 4 out of 5 stars. This is not a book I would recommend if you like horror novels or thrillers, and that's the reason you're going into it. If you just want to read a really interesting, strange, and kind of strangely, beautifully well-written story, then I would say go ahead and look into it. But if you don't like strange books, if you don't like weirdly dark ones, this is definitely not for you. I also want to say thank you to those of you who said happy birthday. My birthday is on Canada Day. My next video, because of that, will be a birthday book haul. I know you guys haven't seen a book haul on this channel in like 8 months. And that is it, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.